عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
حياكم الله جميعا. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much all for joining us on this very long day. So we're very happy that you're still sticking in, around with us. We have three interesting presentations, focusing really on one of the themes that the conference so far has been, or the symposium so far has been shedding some light on. I attended one of the sessions on the analysis of the TIMSS and international tests. And one key finding was actually focusing on the other factors in the school level factors. So they are definitely very important, and we definitely see that through the role of leadership. Leadership today, school leadership, and especially at this time, have been doing an amazing job, really trying to cope up with all of the challenges with the pandemic. And we can definitely see the excellence in school leadership through the programs and the efforts and the teacher training and the teacher leadership, and really trying to capture the community involvement as well during this pandemic. So for us today, we have three very interesting presentations, and they are actually, I would like to take you back to one of the themes that our keynote speaker in the morning, she talked about, which is cognitive diversity, because I think all of these three presentations are actually filling into that cognitive diversity by bringing in how teachers, how leadership within three Arab countries is actually perceived, how their role is actually being carried out, and what are the challenges and the maybe futures or potentials for school leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Mary Ellen Kelly.
Not doctor yet.
Not doctor yet? Okay, well, you're getting there.
Candidate. I would thank you very much, but
you are getting there. She's actually working on her PhD with the University of Toronto, and but she is a very experienced educator with more than 20 years of experience, and some of that was in school leadership. So she's a practitioner. So Mary will actually tell us about the experience of a teacher, of international, leadership within international schools. And that's actually bringing in that cognitive diversity, because I think her presentation will focus on international schools, yet the people who are coming into these international schools are actually coming from national systems. So it's very interesting to hear to what you have to say. So please go ahead and start.
All right. Thank you very much, Aisha, for that wonderful setup for me. First of all, salam alaikum and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, grandmothers, and aunties out there. I know it's such a special day. So my name is Mary Ellen Kelly, or Mary Kelly, and my research, as Aisha said, I'm from the University of Toronto, but I'm actually working at an international school as an elementary principal in Kuwait. So I have been here for 6 years and I'm really enjoying it. So my exploration is on, my research exploration is school leadership in private international schools in Kuwait. And of course, to set the backdrop of this research a bit, we have to understand what led up to this, and looking at, I think we're all feeling it, especially this year, the tremendous growth in technology and globalization over the past decades is driving the importance of education and also driving the demand for international school leaders. So just to, this growth in international schools around the world is unprecedented, and many of the researchers that are working in this field have not caught up with all what's happening. So this just gives a little breakdown of the number of international schools, and these are English medium and bilingual schools. So China leads the chart with 807, and then the UAE is also an area of tremendous growth. So this research and also our conference today is very important. So in 2020, currently there are more than 12,000 international schools. And this is from ISC Research, which is a great area to look for research on international schools if you're interested. And the predictions are for 16,500 in 2028. Also, from a GCC education industry report, they indicate that in Kuwait itself, the country where I'm doing my research, there are 355 private schools. Of these schools, though, there are a smaller number of English medium and bilingual schools, and these were the schools that I drew on for my research sample. Okay, I'm just... So first of all, and Aisha spoke a lot about the role of leaders and how important it is in the school. So this unprecedented growth in the field of international schools has increased the demand for highly skilled leaders that are able to meet the challenges of leading in an international school. So my research is focused on this to identify the challenges faced by school leaders who are moving from national education systems into private international schools. And my research area has just taken place in Kuwait with leaders there. My research questions focus on three areas. The first one is looking at the transition from national systems to private international systems. There is quite a big difference when you change in that from system to system. And then what are the challenges for international school leaders? And then briefly, what strategies and skills do international school leaders use to adapt to these changes? The research design, it was a qualitative study, and I used semi-structured interviews. The participants in my study were international school leaders in Kuwait. Because I am an insider researcher, I had access through the Informal Administrators Network, which was wonderful. And I was able to get 17 participants for my research, which involved the interviews. The participants were school leaders, principals, vice or assistant principals, school heads, and one director. And there were a diverse group of participants in that they came from a variety of countries such as Egypt, the US, Pakistan, Lebanon, Canada, Mexico, and Jordan. The data was collected from November 28th to December 2019. So first off, when interviewing and collecting the information from the school leaders, all of the school leaders found onboarding into the schools very supportive and welcoming. And, you know, most of the leaders were very excited to start on this journey of leading in an international school. So the schools were very welcoming, and most school leaders commented on how they enjoyed learning about the culture. There was Kuwait has quite a lot of groups that support expats because the population in Kuwait has a lot of expats. So the Welcome to Kuwait, the Aware Center, the Informal Administrators Network. And I'm going to give a shout out to the Canadians in Kuwait organization, which is one of the biggest social groups here, even though there are less Canadians here than there are Americans and other expat groups. So that was, you know, the onboarding was great for all the leaders. So now to the challenges, and gathering all the research from the interviews with the international school leaders, it was broken down into three areas that came out very strong in the interviews and in the research. These were the major themes that came out of the research. The challenges were the institutional settings in the schools, the market forces, the business side, and the staff turnover and change. In the institutional settings, of course, coming from a national system, the learning about working in a private international school was very different. The school leaders had to adapt to a new institutional setting where they had bigger hierarchies of leaders within the school. So within the school setting, there would be lots of other administrators, superintendents, directors, owners, and board of governors, and departments, all within the same campus and school setting. So leaders found it a little daunting to kind of connect with all these various parts of the campus and school to figure out how they had to interact with all these different people. And it was different also because when school leaders work in national schools, they have more autonomy because it's just the leader in the school, and then outside the school you have the board. So that adjustment was difficult for teachers to get used to, for leaders to get used to. It took them a long time to figure out their role in the school and also understand the policies and practices, because we know each private international school will be different, and the policies and practices will be different as well. Leaders who adapted better were able to seek help from leaders in the school if there were leaders who had been there longer, and also from staff. So the market forces and business side was also a big challenge for them. Running a private international school was very different for leaders who didn't have to think about the enrollment in their school, didn't have to think about promoting their school. So school leaders coming from national systems see themselves as instructional leaders. Their role is to set the direction, support teachers to improve student success. So the business side was an added challenge in that they had to always be involved in recruiting people, always looking for new people because of the school staff turnover, but also being aware that enrollment was going to drive the school and you needed to promote the school quite a bit. Many recognized also that working with owners, that it took a while to build trust, because owners see a lot of leaders going in and out of their schools. So you establishing relationships and building that trust was very important. And this gets on to the point of staff turnover. And this is the research, the global research on international schools shows that short-termism or the turnover of staff is a problem. And so when you are a leader in the school, you're constantly looking for people to replace, you're transitioning people, you're bringing people in, and you have to orientate them constantly, sometimes throughout the years during the school year. And so it puts an added pressure on the school leaders, but it is an adjustment. All participants shared their frustrations with staffing taking up a lot of their time when they wanted to spend more time working with teachers and improving student success. So the impact on students, of course, would filter down. It's always, school leaders are always focused on what's best for students, and to get what's best for students, you work closely with your teachers to build your teaching teams, to improve your instructional practice. So that's a very important part for leaders. So, and school districts around the world understand the role of school leaders as critical to setting school direction and leading instructional practice to improve student success. That is kind of like a standard around the world. So school leaders play an important role in that way. So, but when you have international schools where there's a constant churn of staff and leaders, it can have a destabilizing impact on instructional practice and school routines. And this ultimately will impact the school climate, and also for the students who really have a hard time with the changes as well, because they do develop very close relationships with teachers, as you know, and very close relationships with the leaders, the principals, and that. So it is a little destabilizing for students as well to see this constant change. So what are the strategies and skills for leaders to build on? Most of the leaders shared how they grew to understand the importance of building relationships, knowing who their go-to people were, building allies within the school that they could go to for information to inform their practice, because they might not know all the nitty-gritty and the history of the school. So it was important to get that information from long-term staff. Also building trust, because not only students, but teachers see leaders coming in and out, and we all can be different. So sometimes you would notice staff waiting and watching to see what the next leader is going to do. And, you know, it can be getting back to that being a little destabilizing. So building trust was very important, and, you know, taking your time to do that. And then always the message has to be to your staff is that the focus is always on what is best for students. And again, research from Morrison in 2018, his research doing a survey with international school leaders indicated the importance of adaptability, ability to cope with ambiguity, creativity, flexibility, showing good judgment, optimism, of course, perseverance, resilience, and my favorite, having a sense of humor about everything, which is very important. So, and particularly when you look at these characteristics, especially during this time of COVID, these are certainly important factors. Going forward, I look forward to seeing more research in the GCC area to see if this research can be generalized across the area or not, or if there are differences from country to country. Also, what is importantly needed are efforts to support leadership in terms of adjusting to institutional settings, understanding the private business side of schools, and managing the high turnover and diversity of staff, which were the three areas identified. Also developing leadership within schools. One of the key findings from my research was that school teachers who transferred from national systems into schools and were teachers in the international schools first and then moved up into positions of leadership did much better than the leaders moving across. And of course, this research will be particularly relevant for the GCC area because we know it's a fast-growing international school market.
It's really a very turbulent environment to work on as a school leader, and definitely one of the biggest challenges. In terms of the question that you raised as reliability, I assure you, like, you know, last year has been really very difficult, especially for international school leaders because of that. And, you know, my heart goes for all the expats who had to live for more than a year now alone and away from their family. So it is a very difficult and challenging environment. And for school leaders to actually be able to sustain those staff and continue, you know, the work and, you know, the focus on instruction and on learning, it's a very big challenge. So, you know, very interesting research, and we look forward to the questions on that. So now we move on. We look forward to the question from the participants. Please do post your questions to Q&A. Also, you can use the interpretation if you need any Arabic translation of the, you know, of what our participants are talking about. So we finally move on with our last but not least participant, Dr. Rania Sawalhi, another experienced educator who has her PhD from the University of Work, and she is currently working with the Qatar University's honors program. So Dr. Rania is going to tell us about instructional leadership, teacher leadership, which is another form of leadership. And, you know, her study is very interesting, a mix of quantitative and qualitative. So we really look forward to, you know, learn a little bit more about teacher leadership, which is an important factor, especially with this pandemic, with teachers having more, you know, responsibilities, you know, in their hands now that the ministries have retrieved a little bit because of the pandemic. So please, Dr. Rania, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. This is a pleasure, and thank you for this great opportunity to share those kind of insights and new perspectives within this study. I'm also going to challenge you just to remember everything that had been said since the morning related to the education reform or to leadership or even to kind of recommendations to see how we can utilize this study. I'm going to have a quick overview about the study I conducted related to teacher leadership in Qatar. Very quick overview related to the context, research questions, methodology, and some of the initiatives that had been launched related to this one. And remember this figure, this orbit that we were going to discuss at the end of the presentation. Qatar had been well known for launching a massive education reform since or early this century. Launched a modified version of charter schools called independent schools in Qatar. Lots of training opportunities for teachers, school leaders, changing the structure of schools, the infrastructure, lots of changes were happening. This study had been conducted between 2016 and 2018. So it was at the end of the period that we call education reform in Qatar. And also, one of the main things that happened during that time was launching of teacher and school leaders professional standards or the licensing system. Beside my experience in conducting this research, I was one of the vice academic principals that we witnessed launching the independent schools in Qatar since 2004. So I tried to see and to explore to what extent we knew about teacher leadership in government schools. So what did the teachers know about the term teacher leadership? How did they experience this in spite of the massive education reform? And what's the nature of what kind of practices related to teacher leadership within those schools? What are the variables that might affect according to the teachers' perspectives that participated in this study? And what conditions could support or inhibit? Once again, this study was part of my thesis within Warwick University. I graduated 2019, and it was mixed method, quantitative. I had 2,969 teachers who participated in this study out of 14,000 teachers, which I targeted the entire population because this was the first study to be conducted about teacher leadership in Qatar, and there were very few studies that had been related to this topic in the Arab countries. And within the qualitative phase, I interviewed 96 female and male teachers that they were working in 8 schools. Once again, this study was conducted between 2016 and 2017, finalized in 2018. In order to be able to answer my research questions, I followed 2 frameworks. One of them in the quantitative phase was adapted from the teacher leadership inventory tool developed by Anjali and DeHart. You will need to remember those 4 factors about sharing expertise, the teacher willingness to share classroom management, their skills in teaching and learning strategies. And also the second one is about sharing leadership, the teacher's willingness to engage in leadership opportunities or activities in the school, and the principal's willingness to offer those kind of leadership opportunities for teachers. The third one is about supra practitioners, where teachers go beyond and above the prescribed roles. And remember that this is something was highly emphasized during the reform. The fourth one is the principal selection, the perceptions of the teachers about the principal practices and how they can select and allow teachers and the leaders in leadership activities that is beyond the ordinary way of teaching and learning. So this is the first framework. The second one is taken from York Bar and Duke from their famous systematic review about teacher leadership. I know that had been conducted several after 2017, 19, 20, but at that stage, this was the most famous. And I followed their definition of defining teacher leadership as a process. And this is something very important. If you're translating this to Arabic, I prefer to say ممارسات المعلمين القيادية. And I will clarify that in a moment. Teacher leadership theory of action helped me to have the themes within the qualitative study and to see what kind of factors that help or inhibited teachers from practicing leadership. So some of the main findings, I can't go through them, all of them for sure. From the quantitative phase, If I'm going to compare it within the study that had been conducted by Angeli and DeHart, I explored degree level, school level, I mean by school level, like primary, prep, and secondary, nationality, age, years of experience, and we will see what had significant results within using or analyzing, within using one-way ANOVA within the analysis. So degree level, bachelor degree or postgraduate, affected sharing expertise with nationality. Sharing leadership was affected, according to teachers' perspectives, by leadership position if they had formal leadership positions within their schools, and nationality. Supra practitioners going beyond the ordinary tasks was affected by years of experience, gender, degree level, and nationality. Principal selections was affected by leadership position, nationality again, years of experience. And this is something very interesting because school level was not mentioned at all by any of those factors, although we see that there's differences between primary, prep, and secondary practices of teachers. Also, gender, male and female teachers, as we all know that sometimes their families, they might not allow them to stay late for female teachers, while the male teachers might be going within those kind of practices. And this was not agreed by the qualitative phase. So all of this had been confirmed except for the school level. The qualitative phase phased within the interviews analysis that school level affects teachers' practices. So I highly recommend that when we conduct research, we need also to explore this kind of variable. Some of the main findings was that teachers never heard of the term in their life. And when say the term, different ways of translating the term, or even the term itself in English. So although the school had changed the structure, although they had different positions, for example, they have been involved in being research coordinator, activities coordinator, subject coordinator, those positions were not before the reform, but they were not considering that this is part of teacher leadership. And they were saying that this is kind of an extra task that would be given to them, but it's not kind of leadership. And I will add to those formal positions something had been very interesting within the findings. When I interviewed the 96 teachers who had been nominated by their colleagues as teacher leaders, there had been different characteristics for them. And you will find it surprising because most of it was related to personal traits. For example, that they are energetic, they have sense of humor, they are humble. You know, it was more focusing on this aspect more than teaching and learning and pedagogies. Some of the conditions, they all focused on the relationship with the principals, not their line manager, with the principals, and the way that the principals would talk to them, and the impact even of the word, the positive environment that they would be having, the autonomy that they will be practicing, the recognition of their work, and what types of development. Once again, Qatar had offered amazing opportunities for professional development for teachers in all levels, but teachers were complaining that it was not customized because when they gained those kind of information, they were not able much to implement directly within the classrooms or within the practices. So from the studies, I also tried to have a refreshing way of expressing how the nature of teacher leadership, and I came up with the orbit model. Why I called it an orbit model? Because we need to see the teachers' leadership activities, and that's why I differentiate between teacher leadership and teacher leaders. So teacher leadership, I mean, first of all, leadership is influencing others. So they influence whoever is coming surrounding them, regardless if they're contacting them on a daily basis or they're just dealing with them for a specific activity. And we need also to recognize that teachers are able to lead from where they stand. Lead as also, again, as influencing. So teachers can influence the students even if they're not teaching them in their classes by walking in the corridors. They can influence their colleagues, they can influence school leaders, communities, and those all coming from the interviews and the success stories that I heard from the teachers that had been nominated by their colleagues. And you'll be surprised that one of the teachers, when I asked her, why did they nominate you? She didn't have much experience. She said that I'm helping them in organizing social events. So social impact was highly recommended by the teachers. It's not only about teaching and learning, and this is something that we are really missing within this pandemic, when we are emphasizing that we need to focus on the social interaction with others. School is not only about delivering or giving or spoon feeding the children. So this is something I'm still working on and developing. I know it's a new way of looking at the teachers, especially when we go to the recommendations and see that we need to rethink about the teacher preparation and professional development programs. We need to avoid one size fits all. This is not the case. And teachers, when they're attending professional development, they need to understand the context that they're going back to. They need to understand the school level, and they need to understand their own values, resources, how they are going to implement this in different ways or different conditions. And that also applies for College of Education and teacher preparation programs like student teachers. They need to understand the importance of teacher leadership. When we talk also about teacher professional learning communities, networks, teachers, they need to engage with each other, and they need also to highlight the importance of utilizing those kind of experiences and knowing about the tiny details that might impact and influence their practices. We need also to work on developing principal skills and knowledge and dispositions to manage teacher talents. They need to recognize what teachers are doing, and they need to appreciate that in a different ways, not to have a systematic way or a stereotype of how the teacher leader should be. The teachers, when they were talking to me, they were talking about being overwhelmed, they were talking about the stress, and so they all emphasize about the need of having a psychological support or psychological counselors only for teachers within the schools or within the Ministry of Education. We need also to have the students' voice, because teachers have been nominated as teacher leaders. We're hearing from the students and we're developing their practices and we're engaging in different initiatives. And there's a great need to explore the impact of technology. When you say that someone is a teacher leader, everyone would be avoiding to interact and to be leaning in to start practicing. But when we start using different ways or different aspects, like, like you're influencing to other, or you're practicing impact in different ways. So that makes it simpler for teachers, because when I ask them, do you consider yourself as a teacher leader? Most of them, they said no, although they had great impact on their schools. Did I stop in my PhD submission and graduation? No, I tried to summarize the thesis within a small, tiny book for public, for teachers to hear about their stories in Arabic, so that they will be familiar with the terms and know more about their practices. And I also launched a coaching education leadership platform, e-platform, so started to networking and connecting others. And also I utilized the characteristics that I heard from them into 8 main domains, including the need of being about the knowledge about law and the awareness of knowing their rights and the responsibilities, so that they can practice. I'm sure that there are lots to explore and to know more about. And I'm encouraging you all to start practicing and exploring within your context. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rania. MashaAllah, yani very thoughtful and fruitful effort that came, it embodied in something more tangible and practical. So it's really very unlikely that we can see this this research coming full cycle. Like, the research itself, and then the implications of the research actually being used. So that is really very impressive effort on your side. So mashallah, I commend you for that. Thank you so much for all of our speakers. And now we will open the floor for questions. We've got a couple of questions here. So I'll start with the first one from Dr. Umar, who's asking, and this question is to you, Mary. So if you can come back with your, screen, maybe. Yeah. So he's asking, what are the factors that actually motivate, international principals to come and lead international schools in Kuwait? What are the basic factors or motivators?
That is a really good question. And it depends on the country, and often from my perspective, now I didn't research this, but I get the feeling if you're from the US, you are more familiar with Kuwait, whereas in my country of Canada, the familiarity is not there. So I think it is being aware of the country. And since I have been in Kuwait for 6 years and I go back and forth to Canada, I have gotten a lot of interest from colleagues there about teaching internationally in Kuwait. So I think it's just getting the information out there. When people think about going internationally as a leader, they usually look at Europe or someplace like that, or China. So, but I think the motivation can be what they know about Kuwait. I think that's important, and getting the word out to other countries, and making people more familiar with what Kuwait has to offer.
Thank you. There's a request, if you don't mind, to share your email. If you like, it's at your discretion. In the chat, maybe, if you are, because some people are asking for your email to follow up with you.
Okay.
And that is also maybe for other participants. If you're happy to share your email, that will be really nice. Because I think, this platform is amazing, but then, to follow up with all of this rich, information that you presented, and people are interested in it, obviously, because we still have almost the same number of participants until now, and it's almost towards the end.
Yeah.
So, we've got a lot of interested people here.
Well, and I would love to follow up with the other people that I shared the panel with, because the way our work all connected, and it was just so fascinating to hear the work of all the people on the panel. So hopefully we can share all our emails, and I would love to follow up with people too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's another question from Dr. Wahid Hamad as well, who said, thank you, Mary, for interesting presentation. I would like to refer you to my paper. He published something in the Educational Administration Quarterly in 2018, which he investigated the challenges that face international school leaders in Saudi Arabia as they tried to balance the international and the conservative national, and the study identified cultural dissonance as a major challenge, especially with regard to the restrictions mandated by the Ministry of Education to regulate the work of these schools. So he's really not sure if your participants found that similar obstacle in Kuwait, which is
the cultural aspect.
Yeah, the cultural dissonance.
Cultural dissonance. Yeah, there was some of that came out in the research a bit, but I think the people, what I found, most of the leaders that I talked to when they came to Kuwait, they did their research. They wanted to, so they did a lot of research before they came on what the culture was like. They knew it was in, it was a Muslim country, it was in the Middle East, so they knew, for instance, things they had to understand about the culture in terms of their own behavior, what was expected for dress, for, greeting people, for, a lot of things like that. So most of the people were well prepared, and they, of course, knew that, they would be adjusting to a different culture. But that didn't come out as being as problematic as when they went into their schools, which was interesting to me. But I think that also would be a whole separate area. Most of the participants expressed a lot of interest. So I think, getting back to the first question that I had, I think people initially have an interest in the area, and that's what draws them in, and they do their research. Because I think for the most part, international school leaders, they don't just jump in, they usually do their research before deciding where to go.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mary. There is another question from Dr. Wahid to Rania this time, Dr. Rania, and he's asking, did your study consider formal and informal teacher leadership roles? He's asking this because the term teacher leadership is usually mistaken with formal leadership position granted to schools, to teachers by their principals. So did that play a role, like, the formal,
Yes,
informal?
Yes, thank you, Doctor, for your question. I explored both their understanding of the term itself and the practices, either it was formal and informal. Some of them, they mentioned, yes, it's related to the subject coordinators only, but others were nominated by their colleagues because of the other informal activities that even their principals, they were not aware or they didn't recognize such practices. And yes, and the study, my thesis is published, and also I'm starting to publish modified versions of the chapters. So stay tuned.
Very interested in that, actually. We have one of our master students working on teacher leadership. So it's very interesting to see your presentation here. Thank you so much, Azza. I think we are almost out of questions here. On a final, and we are actually ending up. So I don't know, Dr. Ahoud, if you would like to have any comment on the session. If not, we will, adjourn. Dr. Ahoud, would you like to comment on this session?
Hi, Dr. Aisha, thank you very much for this session. I think you are the only session that gets perfect timing. They finished on time, but really very, very helpful presentations. I enjoyed especially Dr. Rania Sawalhi on leadership and teachers. Leadership and management. It's really enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to know more and collaborate with her on that topic. I think now we are wrapping up. Max, if you can join us to wrap up the conference. Yeah, welcome,
Hi.
Max.
Hi, good evening, and thank you everyone for this great panel. My name is Max Eckert. I'm research assistant at the Al-Qasimi Foundation. I'm also one of the lead organizers of this conference as part of the GCES Secretariat. So it's great to finally be in the spotlight for a few minutes, though it's unusual for someone like me. Anyways, I want to thank everyone again. I want to thank all of our keynotes, especially Professor Susan Roberts and Dr. Ahmed Shahi for some very great keynote, interesting keynote presentations. I want to ask our panelists and especially our panel chairs as well for doing this great work and sacrificing their, putting in so much time and effort and commitment. I want to make a few announcements to end the day, and feel free to hang around to all our panelists or leave whenever you feel comfortable. So concluding the first day of the conference, I want to invite all of our presenters to submit their research papers to the Gulf Education and Social Policy Review, also known as GESPR. This is a journal, a peer-reviewed journal that was launched by the Al-Qasimi Foundation in 2019 as part of its effort to nurture ongoing knowledge sharing and to support scholarship on education and social policy issues in the Gulf region. Like I mentioned, it's a peer-reviewed and bilingual academic journal. We've heard today that there's great need for Arabic research to be presented and published. So this is a great avenue for this to happen. GESPR is dedicated to providing education policy research and insights on the Gulf region to readership that includes regional and international scholars, practitioners, organizations, and policymakers to, like I mentioned, inform education and development agendas in the Gulf and beyond. All the submissions by our presenters are initially reviewed by editorial board members, and those endorsed for potential publication are then sent for peer review. GESPR uses a double-blind peer review process, which means the identities of both reviewers and authors, of course, remain anonymous, and the reviewers for each manuscript are contacted according to the areas of expertise. So we invite all of our presenters. We've already heard some great research today, and I'm sure we will hear more great research over the next 2 days. We also encourage everyone to tweet and post about what they've gained or learned today, or what they will gain and learn over the next couple of days, so we can increase our outreach and inform more people about what was discussed today and maybe get even more signups for the next 2 days. If you end up tweeting us, make sure to use the hashtag GCES 2021. We are more than happy to retweet you and welcome you into the virtual and social media GCES family. So another exciting announcement that I can make is that we are announcing the call, or we're opening up the elections for the GCES Vice President. The Vice President is the understudy of the outgoing President. We are very sad to announce that Dr. Ahoud is going to be our outgoing President. She will not step down with immediate effect, but over the next year, she will work together with the GCES Vice President, who will then succeed Dr. Ahoud as President next year. We have two candidates that we are happy to announce. Our first candidate is Dr. Sandra Baroudi, Assistant Professor at Zayed University. And our second candidate is Dr. Khalaf Al-Abri, who is Professor at Sultan Qaboos University in Oman. Please remember to go through the motivation statements of each candidate and vote for them by 4:30 Kuwaiti time on March 23rd, which will be the last day of our conference. Not everyone is eligible to vote for this conference, as voting rights are restricted to members of the GCES Society and panelists and presenters. So all the presenters who are now listening, make sure to check your emails for the invitation link to the GCES Vice Presidential elections. And we also would like to remind you, you can already sort of guess from the background that I'm currently sitting in front, that there's another exciting event happening right after this conference. And this will be the Women at Work post-conference panel discussion, if you will. It takes place in approximately 30 minutes at 5:30 Kuwait time or 6:30 UAE and Oman time. And we have the great privilege and honor to be joined by three very exciting scholars and very accomplished professionals as part of the first Women at Work seminar. It's a series of events that's organized by the Qasmi Foundation. It's the first one this year, and we'll be joined by three great panelists. The first will be our very own GCES President, Dr. Ahoud, who's once again Assistant Professor at the College of Basic Education and the Public Authority for Applied Education and Training in Kuwait. Our second panelist, who you already met earlier today, will be Dr. Priti Verma, Associate Executive Dean and Assistant Professor at the Higher Colleges of Technology here in the UAE. And the third panelist will be Dr. Emily Winship, Assistant Professor at Zayed University, who you will also have the opportunity to meet over the next 2 days, because she will be a panelist who is joining us for the conference as well. So if you want to get to know these three panelists a bit more closely, a bit more personally, and learn about their journeys, and how they find their way into higher education, and discuss what it means to be a woman in higher education today in the Gulf, please feel free to tune in. Other than that, I will leave you with all this information. I look forward to seeing you in approximately 25 minutes. You can register for this panel through a website, gcs2021.com. If you go to the day one schedule and scroll all the way to the end, there'll be another form for you to register and receive the Zoom links. Otherwise, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much again for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9:10 a.m. Kuwait time. This will be 10:10 a.m. UAE and Oman time. Otherwise, I would hand over the word to Dr. Ahoud, and thank you again for your attendance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Being shown from behind the scene. And as Max just announced, if you want to tune in and have more of us, you can join us at Women at Work event that's run by Al-Qasimi Foundation at 5:30 Kuwaiti time. Thank you very much, and looking forward to see you tomorrow for the next second day of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.